Here we are going to look at the destruction of Sennacherib, which was written by Lord Byron in 1815. Just quickly recapping the poem, going through some basic contextual ideas that you can reference and making sure you know, if you get this poem in the exam, what you are going to write. The poem was written in 1815 and is based on a biblical story which was centered around the actual destruction of the Syrian Empire. Byron is an aesthetic poet, meaning that he appreciates form and meter over factual accuracy. So in terms of how it relates, the Assyrian Empire was a real empire. And it was indeed destroyed, however, not overnight. There's lots of reasons as to what happened, but as this is not a history essay, as long as you know that it was based on an actual empire, then that is enough to cover you there. And the poem itself is looking and examining the ideas of the power of God and the binary between that power and the assumed transient power of humanity. The poem, The Destruction of Sennacherib, goes as follows. The Assyrian came down like the wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold, and the sheen of their spears were like stars on the sea, when the blue wave rolls nightly on deep Galilee. Like the leaves of the forest when summer is green, that host with their banner at sunset was seen. Like the leaves of the forest when autumn hath blown, the host on the morrow lay withered and strown. For the angel of death spread his wings on the blast, and breathed in the face of the foe as he passed. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill, and their hearts but once heaved, and for ever grew still. And there laid the steed with his nostrils all wide, but through it there rolled not the breath of his pride. And the frame of his gasping lay white on the turf, and cold as the spray on the rock-beating surf. And there lay the rider distorted and pale, with the dew on his brow, and the rust on his mail. And the tents were all silent, the banners alone, the lances unlifted, the trumpet unblown. And the widows of Asher are loud in their wail, and the idols are broke in the temple of Baal. And the might of the gentile, unsmote by the sword, hath melted like snow in the glance of the Lord. So another poem very similar to Blake's A Poison Tree, with that sense of regular meter, the rhyming couplets that allow us to really remember those key ideas in the message. Byron establishes the predatory nature of the Assyrian army in the opening stanza, using the simile, the wolf on the fold, which suggests the power and the predatory nature of the army. The nouns purple and gold are coupled with the sheen and the gleam of their weapons, which really kind of emphasize the majesty and the wealth of this army. So establishing how human soldiers are powerful, how they move together, and how they are very aggressive in their nature. As the poem develops then, the pair of similes, like the leaves of the forest, using summer and autumn to look at the changing fortunes. Remember, that's the peripeteia of the army, the reversal of fortune that we see with Macbeth. And initially the army is shown like the height of the summer, with their leaves that are green. It's full of life and vitality. But by the morning, they are like autumn and winter, withered and strown. They have perished overnight. The pain and the suffering of the army then, after that volta, that shift in tone and focus of the poem, it's amplified in this third and fourth stanza. There's evidence that the horses were gasping and soldiers were distorted, suggesting the agonizing and painful death that they've suffered at the hands of the angel of death as he spread his wings and breathed in the face of his foe. The poem then concludes with the assertion that the might of the gentile, remember, means a non-Christian, a non-Jewish person, and they have melted under the power of God. The widows of Asher are wailing in sorrow at the death of the army. And there's this sense of human suffering that's portrayed at the end of the poem, all in the face of this kind of punishment from God at the wars that are being wreaked on each other. Byron here is really kind of emphasizing that transient power that humans have and the arrogance of these kind of empires that take on any sort of religious war. Perhaps a little bit controversial at the moment with everything that's going on. So if you are choosing to write about this poem, just write with sensitivity to what is happening in the world. thinking about this as a poem of its time and how really Byron is condemning religious wars. So perhaps something which is quite contextually relevant at the moment. Thinking about then how to compare, or what to compare this poem to, something like the Charge of the Light Brigade, the Sacrifice of the Armies, the war, conflict, exposure, the suffering of war, conflict, the unjustness of war, the religious imagery that runs throughout. You've got The Man He Killed, again centering around the Boer War, so lots of conflict ideas that you can draw on. Belfast Confetti, based on the Irish Troubles, a more recent poem, and again emphasizing the suffering of war. And What Were They Like, based around the Vietnam War, so again looking at the annihilation of a culture or a population or an empire, and the effects of war on people as well as the actual soldiers who fight. So the widows, for example, drawing very nicely with the loss of life in Vietnam. So lots of things that you can compare it to, thinking very carefully about speaking with sensitivity and maturity if you choose this poem, and thinking about those careful links that you can make to other poems in the anthology.